I'm gonna teach you how to make this amazing galaxy background. The cool thing about it is that it has many uses. You can use it as a background for a poster or a greeting card, a postcard, gift tags, even a wrapping paper. You can vary the colors according to your project. You can use shades of blue or blue and purple, add a little bit of pink, even shades of green looks great. It's easy to make, and the material you can find in art supply stores, but also in stationery stores and dollar stores. So let's see what we need to make this amazing galaxy background. So the first thing you need to do to make your galaxy background is to decide the right one for your project. The first thing I do is a little bit of research. I use Google as a start for all my projects, and also Instagram, which I think is a great tool for you to connect with great artists and also to get some future inspiration, since you can save the projects you like. So typing a galaxy background on Google, it will give you a great number of options. Focus on colors. Even if every galaxy you make is going to be unique, it's important to have a good reference when blending the colors. It will help you a lot. For this class, I'm going to be making a variation of a poster I've already made, but instead of blue and green, I'm going to be adding purple. So let's see the material we need. The materials we need are white paper. I strongly recommend paper thicker than 100 grams because as we're going to be using the blending tool and spraying it with water, if you use a thinner paper, it may ruin your project. So I'm going to be using 200 grams paper and with the texture. We're also going to be using ink pads. My favorite ones are distress ink because they react to water and gives you a really cool effect. I'm also going to be using the refill because I don't have all the pads, so I'm using the refill on these ink pads that I bought at dollar stores, and they work really fine for me. With the pads, we're going to use the blending tool with the foam. I suggest you to have one foam for each color because once you use it, it's really hard to change colors because you always end up seeing the previous color unless you use a darker one. So as I'm going to use all these 5 colors, I have all 5 foams here. You can find it in art supply stores. We're also going to be using acrylic paint. It has to be a water-based acrylic paint. This is not a specific brand I like. I just got the first one I found at the dollar store. We're going to be using brush. I really like the big ones. They gives you a better effect than the small ones, but you can make a few tests and see the one you prefer. This is a Pringles lid. So you're going to be using a container to mix the acrylic with water. We also need a water spray with water and a white pen. As I'm making a poster, I'm using also a Copic marker and a dual brush tumble pen for the shading. Okay, so let's start. So once you've chosen the galaxy you want and you have all the materials set, you have to do a little bit of planning beforehand, thinking about the elements you're going to add to your galaxy background. As I'm making a poster that is a variation of this one with letters on it, I decided to leave the center part lighter than the rest. To do that, I made a sketch on pencil so I can build my galaxy around it. If you do the writing beforehand, the letters may look faded, as for example, I don't want the center part to be totally white, so I'm going to be using a little bit of color on it. And as we're spraying it with water, the ink may bleed. So unless that's the idea, the writing should be the last thing you do. Well, let's get down to business. To make our galaxy, first we need the ink pads, the blending tools, and one foam for each color you're using. I always start with the light colors because I can always darken them up if that's the case. The first color I'm using is purple. We start making random circles, leaving a lot of spaces between them so I can add the other colors. We're gonna make always circular movements, so the edges of our circles are lighter, making it easier to blend the colors later on. I'm adding the other colors, always making sure not to rub the foam over the circles that I already made. At first, it may look a mess, but don't worry, soon you will be able to see that your galaxy is taking form. Keep on using the colors back and forth, covering the white spots you have. If you're not sure which color to use, check the galaxy reference you chose in the beginning and try to make it similar. As I want the center of my poster to be lighter so the letters will stand out, I'm adding the lighter blue all over the center of the page where the writing is going to be. I am also adding the light blue to the other parts of the poster. Make sure you know the main color of your project, which is the color you'll be using the most. In this case, the main color I want is the dark blue. So I start finally covering the spaces with the shade of blue I want. You will get to a point where there are no more white spaces to keep your hands on, to keep the paper from moving. I use a slip of paper to help me not to leave my fingerprints all over the project. As I want the edges to be darker, I'm adding black, but not a very solid black, because I'm adding blue over it later. I usually use black to darken the color. You should use your blending tool in different ways, sometimes rubbing it lighter, sometimes harder. This way, your project will look more organic because you're having different shades. Don't worry if your circles ended up being very solid. We can fix that once we spray it with water. Once there are no more white spaces left and you're satisfied with the overall of your poster, it's time to move on. In the beginning, it may be hard to know the right time to stop blending, so it's always better to stop sooner than later. You can continue blending and making adjustments even after having sprayed it with water. Alright, I think we're ready for the next step. Our next step is to make our ink reacting to water. So for that, we're going to need the spray bottle filled with tap water and also towel paper. I prefer to use a spray bottle that I can adjust the quantity of water that comes out. I usually spray once or twice away from the paper just to make sure everything's okay. If this is your first time working with ink pads and water, spray it once and watch how it works. You can spray it as many times as you want, but make sure not to get your paper too wet or it may get wrinkled. My advice is to spray no more than 3 times and redo it after it's dry. Look how cool it looks. This effect works really well also for an under the sea effect. Using the towel paper, you remove the excess of ink and water, blending the colors more naturally. Slightly touch the paper in different spots. Wait until it's dry to retouch using the blending tool. You can speed up the drying process using a heat gun. You can make these steps as many times as you want until you're satisfied with the result. Using the blending tool over the spots sprayed with water will give you even a cooler effect, and blending will look even more natural. I decided to add a little purple to the center of the paper and oops, it got too dark. To fix it, I sprayed with water and used the towel paper. This is how my poster looks at this point. For this part, we need the plastic lid, the acrylic paint, water, and the brush. Start adding a little bit of the acrylic paint to the lid and spray it with water. Then mix it with the brush. The mixture has to be liquid but not transparent. The color needs to be solid, otherwise it will not give the effect we want. If it's too thick, add more water, and if it's too thin, add more paint. To make sure it's the right consistency, tap your brush a few times and the paint should drip a little. You can see the drops falling. If you have big drops, it's too liquid. Add more paint. If you can see different sizes of the paint drops, then it's probably the right consistency. Before doing it straight to your project, use the galaxy you printed out earlier to make a few tests on the consistency, the movement you're going to be making, and the distance between the brush and the paper. At this point, you're going to be making a little bit of a mess, so I suggest you to cover your table with a newspaper. Again, think about the elements you're adding. I'm not spraying the center of the poster because that's where my letters go. In my opinion, we're done here. Now let's wait until it's dry. I will use the heat gun again to speed up the process. To give a very nice touch, I'm adding with a white ball pen some little stars in the empty spaces. Now it's time to write the letters. Let's concentrate not to ruin the whole thing. I will start with the black marker and then add the purple one behind it to give a shadow effect. I think the purple ended up being a little hidden, so I decided to add a little bit of light using the white pen to make the letters stand out a little bit more. And we made it! Here's our final poster and other examples of projects you can make using the same galaxy technique I have just taught you.